Hey, you guys, welcome all you Mavericks out there to our webinar today. And this is on the tax deductible lease purchase and some other ultra uber aggressive real estate strategies. So are you ready to rock? I am going to, first of all, bring up the slideshow here. So let me do that. Let me go full screen. And that should probably do it, I hope. Here we go, bang there. Okay, so we're gonna do a little screen share. I'm gonna run you through a few slides. And let me just make sure the recording's going. Recording's going good. Screen share, slides, there we go. Jen, tell me if it doesn't come up. I think it does. So here we go. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about 7 strategies today. And I will go on and off screen a little bit. And each of these strategies I am rating on my EDGE rating system, So the EDGE rating system, it goes from -5 to +5, and it indicates the proximity close to the legal and ethical line. That legal and ethical line is 0, okay guys? So that's a 0. So when you're at 0, you're on the line. Negative is over the line, positive, in my perception, in my opinion. Negative is over the line, positive is on the correct side of the line. I do want to caution you on this webinar that while I am an attorney, I am not your attorney. So you cannot take any of this as legal advice. Before you implement any of these strategies that you might have any questions about, you should consult your broker, your attorney, or your spouse. Okay, whomever it is that you go to for legal, real estate, and ethical advice. So there we go, legal, ethical, and real estate advice. So here we go. Strategy number 1 is the tax-deductible lease purchase. That is the thing that I featured in the webinar today, and I will tell you that is an awesome strategy. So the idea is that it helps purchasers, so let's talk about it for a minute. It helps purchasers with credit or income loan qualification problems, and this is for people who can't get a loan. That's when you typically use it. Now, I want to point out that to my best of my knowledge, there's no IRS ruling either way on the tax deductibility. So if you're going to implement it, you should recommend to the buyers that they speak with the lease purchasers, that they speak with their CPA. So let me talk about that. I'm going to go off screen for a moment here, stop the share, and I'll talk about that. So here's the deal. Let's say you have some purchasers, and you wouldn't want to do this unless the purchasers have a reasonable amount of down payment. And remember, I said that this is designed to solve a credit problem or an income problem. They can't qualify for a loan because of income or because of credit. You can get your income up, you can get your credit up over time, but the sellers want to sell and the buyers want to buy. And the big problem is you can always do a lease purchase. You know what a lease purchase is. So a lease purchase is simply where you have a purchase contract. So let's start with the basics. You have a purchase contract, and so they're buying the home. Normal purchase contract, earnest money, set it up in escrow, do everything you do with a normal purchase contract. However, you're going to have a very long escrow, a very long closing date. So let's say you make the closing date 2 years off. You're also going to have the buyers do their due diligence, their inspection, those kinds of things. You're going to have them do their due diligence prior to moving into the home, because we're going to have a companion lease. That's what I would do on a lease purchase, so that when the buyers move into the home and take possession, they've signed off with respect to all their inspections. So they've looked at the preliminary title report, they've done everything. Everything is resolved. The only thing that's not resolved is the loan. They are not in a position to get a loan. So the way you handle that, in my view, this is just what I would do, what I do in lease purchases, is you have to decide who takes the risk. Who is going to take the risk of the buyers being able to get a loan or not be able to get a loan like 2 years later when the time comes to close on this lease purchase? Well, in my view, it should be the buyer's risk, not the seller's, because the buyers don't have the income or credit. And by risk, that doesn't mean get sued and lose everything. It means that there should be an amount of deposit, earnest money, put up, which is released to the seller and then is retained by the seller in the event. And we haven't even gotten into the tax deductibility aspect yet. I'm just talking to you about a lease purchase, which would then be retained by the seller in the event that the buyers can't buy the home in 2 years. So obviously you don't want buyers to do this if they don't feel like, in whatever the time frame you set, it can be a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, if they don't feel like they're going to be able to buy the house. They maybe it's a loan, maybe it's an inheritance, maybe it's a gift, doesn't really matter, but they have to feel comfortable that they can buy the house. And the buyers, the buyers who are also leasing the house, they need to just understand it's all just business, that the money they're putting up is the risk money. And then in the event they can't, then they move out of the house. They lose their deposit, but they do not get sued, because you'll have a provision in there that that is all that they forfeit in the event that they can't close. So they very clearly understand, here's what I'm getting out of this, here's what I'm paying, this is the lease, and we're going to have a purchase contract and then a companion lease. So the purchase contract has a deposit released to the seller. Let's say on a $300,000 house, I would probably have a minimum deposit of, to me, I would think 5%. Which would be $15,000. That would be what I would view. It's up to you, but I would view that to be minimum. That $15,000 is released to the seller. That would make the seller feel like the buyers have enough skin in the game that they're going to do everything they can to get that loan in a year or 2 or 3, and that they're going to take good care of the house because they're going to view it as their own. That's the really important part of the buyer putting up the money. You, by the way, you won't get paid. You should not get paid, in my view, your commission until it actually closes, although in many cases may be part of your commission. I've certainly arranged to get paid out of the buyer's deposit. Let's say if I'm earning, a 2 or 3% commission, whatever it is, maybe a third of that, some part of that at the time that this is all facilitated, okay? So, and then the rest upon closing. That's fair to the seller. You get something now, you get something later when it closes. So that's the amount of the deposit you'd put up. And so you have and then you have a lease, and the lease is for whatever that term is and has a monthly lease payment in it. So they move into the house under the lease after they have done their due diligence, waived all their contingencies, gone non-refundable on their deposit. They then move into the house, and you have both a lease and you have a contract, and the lease and the contract must reference each other. So you have a provision in the purchase contract that says that there's a lease that's associated with this purchase contract, providing for pre-possession prior to closing. And you have a provision in the lease contract that says that there's a purchase contract that is associated with this lease. And then any default in the purchase contract shall be a default in the lease, and the people shall have to move out. Now, one of the advantages to this, as opposed to the sellers doing a carryback and actually giving the buyer's title, is that it's much easier in every state to evict someone than it is to foreclose. If you foreclose on someone, then you oftentimes have to evict them as well. So the eviction process is much easier. So that is the typical lease purchase, if that makes sense to you guys. Now, how do you make that tax deductible? And again, I want to caution you that, to my knowledge, there is no IRS ruling on the strategy I'm going to teach you, so have your buyers check with their CPA. But here is a way, because what's the problem with a lease purchase? The problem with a lease purchase, and it's so unfair under the tax law, is that the seller has to take the lease payments into income, but the buyers cannot deduct them. The buyers cannot deduct the payments. So what is fair about that? I mean, it's not fair at all. One person's taking it in an income, but the other person can't deduct it. So, however, if that lease payment was somehow able to be converted to an interest payment, then the sellers would still be in the same position. They take it in as income, but the buyers would be able to deduct it. And so so it would be just a better scenario all around. The only entity that loses is the IRS. And unless you care about giving the IRS more money, then obviously it's a good strategy to use. So how do you make a lease like this in accordance with the purchase tax deductible? Well, again, let's look at the purchase contract on a $300,000 home, and let's say we have a 2-year escrow. So what you do is you take the $15,000 earnest money that is now being released to the seller, and that's of course part of the down payment. So there'd be a remaining balance on the purchase price of how much? $285,000. So what you do is, let's say that what it's going to take, let's say that the seller's loan payments, not that it really matters, but let's just say the seller's loan payments on this home are $2,400 a month. So, and they have some equity in there. So let's say you decide on $3,000 a month as the payment that the purchasers are going to make, and that's inclusive of taxes and insurance and everything. In other words, it's the seller will continue to pay taxes, insurance, and everything. So let's say it's a $3,000 a month payment that you all negotiate. So what you would do is on the lease amount, you should have a nominal lease payment. So on the lease contract, you should have a nominal lease payment. So the lease contract will be a normal lease contract, and it will have a lease payment in it, and there probably would be no deposit under the lease contract because you're having a non-refundable deposit released to the seller under the purchase contract. So the lease contract might have a nominal lease payment of, let's say, $300 a month. And so that leaves $2,700 a month that still is to be paid by the buyers to the sellers. So what you do is you have the purchase contract simply say this, that the buyers shall sign a note in favor of the sellers, and then you just have a normal promissory note drawn up in the amount of $285,000, and you compute an interest rate that will result in a payment of $2,700 a month. And so that then the buyer shall pay interest-only payments of $2,700 a month to the sellers during the term of their prepossession of the home, during the term prior to escrow. It's not in consideration of possession. Now, I want to be clear. It's not in consideration of possession. That's the $300 in the lease payment, but just they will make that payment until they close on the property of $2,700 a month under the note. And then it should have a provision in it that says that in the event that after the 2-year escrow period, the buyers do not go ahead and close on the property, that the note shall become extinguished, and however they shall forfeit the down payment they made on the house. And so what you're doing there is you don't want to put the buyers in a situation where the sellers can sue them on that note if they can't close. All you want is for them to have to be able to lose their $15,000 deposit. So you put an extinguishment clause in there that the note is extinguished in the event that certain things don't happen at the closing date. And so the buyers are in a position. So all of a sudden, then the buyers are making $2,700 a month payments under this interest payments on a note, same tax impact to the seller. The seller is what? Taking that in his income and the $300 lease payment, but the buyers are getting to tax deduct as an interest payment, an interest payment on a loan related to their purchase of a home. And if you look at the IRS rules with respect to loan tax deductibility with respect to homes, it's we're going to call ambiguous as to whether there actually has to be a title transfer and actually has to be a mortgage note, actually has to be a title transfer and mortgage note. That is a legal title transfer. Because remember, whenever a buyer signs a purchase contract on a home that's accepted by a seller, the buyer does get title. I want to say that again. The buyer does receive title. Under the law, it's called equitable title. There's equitable title and legal title. Once you have a contract in escrow, the buyer has what's known as equitable title. And in the IRS code, and again, check with CPA, the buyers check with their CPA, but based on a reading of the IRS code, it isn't clear that this needs to be under the law what's known as legal title and actually has to have a mortgage on the property. So in any case, that is what I call my tax deductible lease purchase strategy. You never would want to do this, never ever want to do this. Like I say, this is an aggressive strategy. You never want to do this without having the buyer consult with their CPA and or their attorney to see if they're comfortable with the risk that the IRS might disallow it. The IRS could disallow it if they're audited. And so you want to do that. But the idea with these strategies is just to have these kind of creative techniques in your tool belt. And there's not a problem in the world with using them as long as you're comfortable from a legal and ethical standpoint in a strategy like this, that you make sure that you advise your purchasers to get advice from their CPA or attorney. Now, I also want to caution you, with any type of advice you give your buyers or sellers, that you feel like you want to make sure there's that advice is not, let's say, forgotten, that there's a record of it. I'm sure you know this, but I tell my students who I coach, the agents who I coach, always put that in an email. So you don't have to make it like a big warning email. You just want to make sure, if you've suggested to your buyers in anything you advise them, where you want to make sure that it can never be said you didn't tell them that, just in a nice friendly email, just mention, oh, by the way, don't forget to do this. Don't forget to do this, whatever it is. That is another piece of great advice that's just a little side thing with respect to this webinar. Okay, so let's go back to the screen share. That is the tax deductible lease purchase. And I think we already have a question. Let me just take a look under the comments. Let me see here. Is that $15,000 going to the buyer's down payment? And the answer is yes, CB, it is. Will the attorney hold the down payment in escrow for 2 years? No, it should be released to the seller. The down payment should be released to the seller. And can't we put in a contract that homeowner would receive money in event of default by buyer? They receive the money. Yes, they receive the money right at the time that the buyers move into the house. They should. It's their money. Buyers have lost that money. It's gone. But if they do close on the house, it's not gone at all. It applies against the down payment. Okay, let's go back to the screen share here. There we go. Bum, 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 bum. Beautiful day here in Arizona. Okay. Strategy number 2, the seller wrap carryback. This has an edge rating of +1. So it's also over the line, but it's close to the line. And I'll explain to you why in a minute. Obviously, the one here is +1, and that's close to the line because, well, we're not even sure that the IRS would allow the deduction. We're not saying they wouldn't. We're not sure they would. I could not find any cases either way on it, so that's why it's just over the line, an edge rating of +1. Same here, edge rating of +1. I'll tell you why, just over the line in my opinion. It gives buyers the advantage of a seller's lower market interest rate. That's typically why this is done. It's a wrap, and it also can solve an income and credit problem. So let me go back off of screen share just because I like to be on the screen. There we go. Okay, so I think you guys probably know what this is, but I just want to go through it real quickly because a lot of agents don't see it clearly. A wrap is nothing more than a seller carryback. That is, the seller finances the home for some period of time. So, which is the case with a lease purchase, but in this case, it's different because the buyers are obtaining title to the property. With a lease purchase, the buyers do not obtain title to the property until they actually close. With a wrap mortgage, when you wrap a mortgage, the buyers do obtain title to the property, and the sellers take a carryback, take a note and a mortgage on the property. Since the buyers get title, the sellers do what? The sellers get a mortgage back like they're the lender. Now, if the property was free and clear, that is, if the seller's property had no loan on it, then there'd be no wrap necessary because there's no loan to wrap. A wrap means that we're taking the seller's note, the note that the sellers are carrying back, and I'll give you an example in a minute, and we're taking the existing mortgage on the property, what the sellers owe, and we're wrapping it with the note that the sellers are carrying back. And I'll give you an illustration of that in a minute. So scenario might go like this. Home $300,000. In this case, I would suggest that you make sure the buyers, if you're the listing agent, obviously you're a buyer's agent, you want to get this done at as low a down payment maybe as you can. But if you're the listing agent, I would suggest that at least 10% down in this scenario, because in the event that the buyers don't perform, then the sellers would have to foreclose. The sellers would have to foreclose in order to get that title to the house back. So you do want to have a down payment. You want to have a down payment, which is more than I would think necessary under the lease purchase. So let's say you have a $300,000 home and you have a $30,000 down payment. $300,000 home, $30,000 down payment, $270,000 loan. So the buyers put up the $30,000, they get title to the property. Oh, and let's say you have a $200,000, let's say you have a $200,000 existing loan on the property. You have a $200,000 existing loan on the property. So here's what we do. So the sellers sell the property, take the $30,000 down payment, and take a note back from the buyers. When they convey title of the property, they take a note for $270,000 back from the buyers, and that note has a clause in it that it is obviously subordinate to the existing, for the buyers acknowledge there's an existing first loan, existing first deed trust, existing first mortgage loan, however you characterize that in your state, an existing loan on the property, and that remains on the property. The buyers make the payments under their $270,000 note to the sellers. The sellers then make the payment on their existing loan until the buyers, and then that loan that the sellers take back, that note is for maybe some period of time, like 2 years. And at that point, it has to be paid off by the buyers getting new financing. And then the sellers, of course, have to do what? Pay off their existing note with it, because the buyers won't be able to obtain new financing unless the new financing company can put a first mortgage loan on the property. So that first mortgage loan would end up paying off the seller's note. Make sense? Okay, so the note, all of this is a seller carryback, $270,000. You put an interest rate in it, whatever's fair, and make sure the interest rate does two things: that the payments being received by the purchaser, by the seller, covers their mortgage payment on the property. Okay, so that the interest payments being made by the buyer under the $270,000 note need to be enough that the sellers can make their mortgage payment, their interest, their insurance payment, pay the taxes, all that there's enough there to do that. And obviously the buyers are responsible to pay the taxes, insurance, etc. But you want to make sure that that is part of the payment to the sellers, because the sellers want to make sure it gets paid, in my view. You can, and that's many times escrowed, certainly escrowed when it's escrowed in the seller's mortgage payment. Make sense? So then there probably should be some additional surplusage. The note payment being made by the buyers to the sellers should be larger than the amount of the payment the sellers have to make on their loan, because the sellers probably have equity. Now, you can have an exact wrap where the seller's loan on the property is $270 and the buyers are wrapping it $270. They're giving them an exact wrap. That's just called an exact wrap. And then the payments might just be matching, because the sellers have no equity and therefore would not be entitled probably to any interest, any excess interest, although maybe just for doing this, they should get some. Okay, so do you picture that? All this is the seller taking a note and note back and getting security in the form of a trust deed on the property. And if they owned it free and clear, that would all be great. But since they don't, that's wrapping the existing first mortgage loan. Okay, well, that's all easy. That's all easy stuff, I would think. But here's the problem. Here's why it's just possibly over the edge. You can make this decision yourself. There's nothing illegal about it, so it's over the edge. There's nothing unethical about it, so it's on the, in my view, positive side of the edge, because there's nothing illegal, nothing unethical about it. And the reason my lease purchase strategy I have as a positive one on the positive side of the edge is because there's no ruling or nothing definitive that it's illegal, and it's certainly not unethical. You know, what is, if it is legal, and that is if the IRS code would end up allowing it, then there's certainly nothing unethical about having your payment in a home be tax deductible. I mean, let me ask you, why is it in the US that lease payments are not tax deductible and interest payments on a mortgage loan are? I mean, there's no sense to that. It's a person moving in a home and making payments on a home. It's just to encourage home ownership. So there's no real ethical or moral thing here. So, okay. So the reason it's a +1, though, and just barely over the line, is because of this. The most mortgage loans, that is the seller's loan on the property, have a due on sale clause. And so when under a lease purchase, the real advantage to this lease purchase, or what I call a note purchase, where you use the note to get tax deductibility, is it generally would not trigger the due on sale clause on the existing financing that the sellers have on a house. So they can safely do this without triggering that due on sale clause. That's a huge advantage to the lease purchase, or that hybrid that I talked to you about, the note purchase, where in this situation, where title is transferred from the seller to the buyer and the sellers take this note back that wraps the existing loan, it would generally trigger any due on sale. Well, it would trigger any due on sale clause in the existing loan documents, and usually there is such a thing. So the strategy How do you keep that from happening? Well, you can't for sure keep it from happening, but I'll tell you in practice why it generally happens. Mortgage lenders don't check title, don't check the title of property periodically, generally don't, just to see if it's in the name of the person who's making the payment. So what you want to do when you set this up to keep the lender from becoming aware that their note is being wrapped, that somebody else actually owns the property, is number one, you want to continue to have the sellers make their mortgage payment. They collect the payment from the buyer under the note the buyer signed, and they continue to write the check and make the mortgage payment. But the second thing that people don't think of is that you don't want to have the seller cancel their homeowner policy. So the buyers will probably want to put a homeowner policy on in their own name, and so there'll be the extra cost here is if the sellers cancel the homeowner policy, then that triggers the lender to say why, because the lender wants that in case the house burns down, the lender can get their loan paid off. You also don't want to notify the lender that there's a new policy on with the buyers with some different person. So the idea is that the sellers just keep their existing insurance on the home in place with the lender, keep making the payment. So that's the added cost of the deal. But the buyers probably want to protect themselves and their content by getting a policy on the home as well. Okay, so now the risk involved here, the big risk involved here, and there is a risk, is that the lender will find out and will trigger the due on sale clause, which would cause a problem for both the buyer and the seller. It's why most people, you don't see a lot of these. There are some loans that don't have a due on sale clause, in which case you use them all the time. They're not illegal. You're not going to get handcuffed and thrown to jail by doing it. It's not unethical. So it is over the line from a legal and ethical standpoint, but it's very aggressive, and there are risks involved, as there are with any aggressive strategy. So that is strategy number 2. And let me go back to the screen share here. Okay, there we go. Okay, strategy number 3, send in a clone. Send in a clone. Well, the send in a clone, I've got that at a 0 edge rating, and it's not because there's any legal issues with it at all. And actually, ethically, I'm not sure there's an ethical problem with it, but I don't know. I guess the best way to say it is it allows buyers to soften sellers and determine their bottom line. It's legal according to the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics. There's nothing in it that would make it unethical. And again, you're not doing it anyway, but for you to be involved in your buyers doing it, and I'll explain what it is in a minute. But is it right? Well, I don't know. I'll let you make the determination of whether it's right. I actually picked this strategy up from my friend and partner, Harvey Mackay. Harvey Mackay is a nationally syndicated columnist. I'm CEO of his online university, Harvey Mackay University. He wrote a blockbuster book back in 1988 called Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. Harvey, by the way, is just a rockin' amazing guy. He's 84 years old. We just celebrated his birthday here, a couple of months ago, and back in October. And he's just it's more than a couple of months ago. Just an amazing guy. And 84 years old, it's like he's got the energy of 35. Well, this was a strategy that he didn't necessarily apply to real estate. Anything you're buying, he called it send in the clones. So here's how, I'll go back off screen share. So here's how that would work in a real estate. Here's how that would work in a real estate scenario. So let's say you're interested in a home. So what you do is you have some friends, you go through a home and you're interested, and obviously, you don't want to show too much interest with the sellers. So what you do is you call friends, and you have friends go through the house, and they express a lot of interest, and they actually write up a contract on the house, a contract at a very low price, and they negotiate like crazy, and then they work the seller down as far as they can, but they're always below that, and they always have a contingency to get out. They have an inspection contingency, whatever, and so they go through this process of working the seller, and finding out bottom line, the seller's bottom line. There it is. And so basically, you're having somebody else do your due diligence. You're having somebody else do your due diligence on a house if you're a buyer. and also beat up the seller a little bit, disappoint them, get them all softened up, find out their bottom line. Then you know, who, you know, in the eyes of the seller, you know, you're just like, you're just somebody else. You have no relationship with this other person. Then you come in the negotiation a lot more knowledgeable and obviously knowing the seller's bottom line. Now, I am not, again, I had that at a 0 right on the line. I'm not advocating any of this to you guys. This is just on super aggressive strategies, having a little fun today. I personally would not do this. I don't know, with a buyer. I just, you know, I mean, why? I don't know. I just don't feel right. You know, I mean, there's nothing illegal, whatever. But I will tell you, it's a great thing to be aware of in 2 contexts. Number one, if you're a seller, number one, you 3, maybe you want to use it, which case, whatever. If you're a seller's agent, I have seen this being done. This was in a Blockbuster book. This strategy, not with respect to real estate, just with respect to anything you buy. Harvey's not a real estate guy. But this kind of thing is done in various areas a fair amount. This idea of having somebody go in and do the, we'll call it intelligence, do the intelligence, and also find out bottom line, soften up sellers. This is a strategy that's used in a lot of situations in a lot of industries. And I've not seen it used a lot in real estate, but I have seen it used in real estate. So it's something as a seller's agent you just want to be sensitive to in case you sense that something like this is happening. Rare, but does happen. The other reason to know it is you might want to use this with respect to some other things that you're purchasing. There are scenarios where I just feel like it's a bit distasteful. I don't know why. It just doesn't sit right with me. But there might be other situations when you're buying other things when it would sit perfectly right and you can end up getting a lot better buy. Okay, so that is strategy number 3, and that's called send in the clones. You send in a clone, and that is a replica of you. Okay, so strategy number 4. This I call the seller mind shift close, and this is an edge rating +2. I actually would, you'll see here, changes the seller's perspective from being a seller to a buyer in your offer presentations. This is powerful. This is something, this is worth the time of the webinar. For those of you that are not in my coaching or haven't heard this, this is totally an amazing strategy. This would be a +5. I mean, a total +5 if I didn't see it occasionally used. It's so powerful. I didn't see it occasionally used by real estate agents who really know that the seller could get more, but they just want to get the deal done and make a commission. And as long as you really believe when you use this that this is a deal the seller should take. This is the most powerful closing technique that I developed this years ago, and I've never thought of anything or seen anything taught out there that's more powerful in terms of getting a seller to accept an offer they should. So let me explain it very briefly. Go off screen share. So it works like this. You have an offer on a seller's home. Let's use our $300,000 home. Only less, in this case, say it's listed for $300,000, and a fair price on this home would be $285,000. We'll just use $285,000. So let's say you do have an offer for $285,000, but the sellers are just absolutely determined to get $293,000, $294,000, over $290,000. They've told you, you know, we're just absolutely not going to take less than $290,000 for this home, and would really like to get closer to $295,000. But $285,000 is the right money. It's the fair price. And let's say the home's been on the market for a little while, and you really just know that this is the best offer they've seen. This is the only offer they've seen. There have been lots of buyers through it, and that this is a deal they should take because you know the rule. Time is acid to the price of a home. Time is acid to the price of a home, particularly when a home is an MLS. You know that every day that it sits on the market, that perceptually buyers pay less because they presume that other buyers have seen it, haven't bought it. Maybe there's something wrong. Maybe it's just overpriced. But the bottom line is they don't feel like they're going to pay as close to the list price the longer a home sits on the market. So if a home's been on for a month or two, particularly in the $300,000 price range, maybe even a few weeks and hasn't sold, it's starting to decline in value, not because the home intrinsically is lesser valued, but simply because the perception of buyers is going to be that it's overpriced, and particularly in a hot price range like the $300,000 price range. And so you really want to get the seller in their own best interest and yours, but in their own best interest to accept the offers they should. So you have this offer of $285,000, and what you do is you say to the seller this when they're sitting there and they're saying, no, really want to come back in the like low 290s, and you say, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, let me ask you a question. I'd like you to just do something for me before we make a decision. Would you change your mindset from being a seller to being a buyer? Let's just do this. It's really important. And what I mean is this. If you're a buyer and you have $285,000 cash, you're not the seller of this home. There's no emotion involved. You're a pure buyer. It's pure money because that's all this is. You want to sell this home. I know you've had many years of enjoyment in this home. You brought up your family in this home, but right now it's just money. It's just money. And so if you're a buyer rather than a seller and you have $285,000 in your pocket, and you as a buyer, because you really as a seller, if you sign this, these buyers are gold plated, you have the $285,000. So you have this money. So the only reason you're holding out is to see if you can do a little better money-wise, right? And they'll say, yeah. Okay, it's just the money. It's just investment. It's just investor stuff. That's all this is about. It's purely investment stuff. So now change your mindset. If you're a buyer and you have $285,000 in your pocket because you really are a buyer, if you sign this contract, you have this home sold at $285,000. You have $285,000 in your pocket. So if you don't sign this contract, you bought this home back at $285,000. And let me ask you, as a buyer, and be serious, as an investor buyer, not an emotional buyer, of every single thing you could put your money in today, $285,000, knowing that this home had been on the market 44 days and we've seen nothing, no offers, nothing higher than this, either no offers higher than this or no offers at all, knowing that as time goes on, this home becomes less valuable because buyers perceive that since it's been on the market and not selling, it must be not worth close to the list price. With all that going on and all the alternative investments, all the places you could put $285,000, is this where you'd put your $285,000? Is this the single best home, the single best stock, the single best place, the single place you'd say to yourself, I'm going to gamble $285,000, knowing that this home is going down in value as it sits on the market? I think $285,000, I'm going to gamble that in the event that I can make $5,000 or $6,000. It's not a good investment. So all I'm asking you to do is please reconsider and please look at this the way it should be looked at, where if you reach down and sign this, it's gone. You have $285,000 in your pocket, and you know you would not take that money as an investor of every alternative that's available and buy this home to make $5,000 or $6,000. That to me is the most powerful seller close, to get a seller to do what they should, that I've ever seen, heard, used. I created that 15, 20 years ago. I don't know how I came across it. I don't know how I thought it up, but it has worked like a dream. Okay, let me go back to screen share for you guys. And we are on the next strategy, which is number 5, buyer escape hatch, edge rating +2. And that is this. This is the idea where you give your buyers the ability, if you can get this through, it's just you try it, you can't always be sure it'll go through, the ability to bail out on the contract just before closing. And to me, when you're representing buyers, I'm a seller's guy, so I don't really do this. But I watch for it. I would never let it go through as a seller agent, but I got to tell you, some seller agents aren't sharp enough to pick up on this. So if you're representing a buyer, you just subtly work into a contract language. You have your normal contingency, and that's usually boilerplate in a contract. So you just, you can have that in there. You can put it in, or you can reference the existing contingency that's in there. But the key phrase is, if you actually write in the contingency, you might even use this language, just in the comments where per the contract contingency clause, this contract is contingent upon the buyer's ability to qualify for a $240,000 loan at 4.2% interest on or before such and such a date. That's the time period. Also contingent on buyer's attorney's approval of the loan documents. Now that's the key here. You've got a time period in the first sentence or a time period in the actual loan clause. But if you put this other clause in here, the buyers never see their final loan documents. I can go off screen share. The buyers never see their final loan documents till just before the closing. So it gives your buyers a possible way if sometimes things just change in life. And I know you want to earn a commission. I know you don't want your buyers to bail out of a deal. I'm simply pointing out that I do have a few people who for years, they're close friends of mine, they never buy a house. I don't go out and show them houses. I don't do any of that. I have agents in my circles here in Arizona do that. But sometimes there are a few people who would never buy a house without me helping them with the contract language to make sure that they have an escape hatch, that right up in a house, an investment property, anything, they want neat and nuance in language that in the event circumstances change in their life, you never know. We could have an event in this country that changes the whole economic scene and like tomorrow. You just don't know that. Somebody could have an unforeseen event happen in their life, even though they love this home and they're qualified for the home and the inspection was fine, that all of a sudden the home is just not conducive with it, is not conducive to their plans. This stuff happens. So I believe that in properly representing buyers, I want to give them this escape hatch if I can. And that's what it's about. And basically it would allow them prior to closing to have their attorney look at the loan documents and basically say, you know, because loan documents are loaded with all kinds of stuff, as you know, very hard-edged stuff, to basically say this just honestly, this doesn't fit your circumstances based on what's happened in your life, and to give them a possible avenue for bailing out. It's just a little escape hatch. It's a safety thing. And it's something, again, with all of these, with this kind of a thing, again, I would check with your broker, have the buyers maybe even have their attorney look at it and do the wording. So don't get yourself in a situation where you're saying to the buyers, this absolutely will give you an out at the last minute if you want it. Basically, this is a possible way that you might have an out. And why don't you, if that's important to you, and particularly if you're representing a relative or a friend and you want to make this happen, that you give them this idea where they could bail out at the end, and you have maybe have them see their attorney and get that done with crisper wording than this. This is just to give you the concept. Okay, so that is strategy number 5. Strategy number 6. Best effort clause, edge rating 2. Buyers agree to use best efforts to obtain their loan. This, I don't even have to go off screen share on this. This I think is really important. Buyers sometimes have a change of heart. We just talked about that, okay, in the previous one. This is shifting gears now. Buyers sometimes have a change of heart, and they end up bailing out on deals and use the loan clause to do it after they've gone through and you've worked out any inspection issues. The other contingencies have been waived. Usually the longest running contingency is what? Is the loan contingency. And so what this does is buyers agree to use best efforts to obtain the loan. It raises the legal effort standard. There's a standard in the law, in contracts, and I used to teach contracts here. I was a law professor. At night I did it for fun. I mean, what they paid me was ridiculous, but I just enjoyed teaching contracts at the law school. And the normal standard for performance under a contract is that you use reasonable efforts. There's a higher standard, and that's best efforts. That's a very high standard. It means you do everything under the sun, everything you possibly can to fulfill whatever this clause is, this covenant's a promise, or this contingency in the contract. And so it raises the standard for the buyers to best efforts. Most buyer's agents won't even pick up on that. And all you're really just saying in a nice way is, hey, if I'm going to tie my house up contingent on a loan, I want you to go out there and bust your butt and use best efforts to get it. So that is a really important thing to do from my perspective if you're a seller's agent, that you raise that standard. Okay, so and strategy number 7, the multiple offer power play. I give that edge rating number 2. And this places added pressure on a buyer to accept a seller counteroffer. Let me go off screen share and I will explain that. So Adam Ferguson is an agent. I just love Adam. He's an agent with Fairfax Realty. Adam, if you're on today, how are you doing? And I hope you don't mind me using you as an example. Adam called me a couple nights ago, right after I landed from DC. coming back from a 3-day training trip back on the East Coast with Jen. Jen was back there with me with her family, Gary and her husband Gary and her daughters Olivia and Liliana. Hi Olivia, hi Liliana. If you're watching, Jen, you can play this little part of the video for them. Love you guys. They're like daughters to me. I've like adopted Jen's daughters as my daughters, my granddaughters. And so in any case, Adam called me. Adam's one of the agents who we coach back there with Fairfax Realty. And Dave, if you're watching this morning, Dave is the owner of Fairfax Realty, amazing company, 1,400 agents. And I love going back, love working with Dave, love working with the managers, love working with the agents. And so Adam called me when I got back and he said, Greg, I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're tired, but I've got the strategy you taught me for getting this home sold. I think he has it listed at $1.3 million. He said, it worked. I mean, I've got like 2 offers on this $1.3 million listing. And I think he sent me a text message and left me a voicemail. So I have to call, I have to call him back, even though I'm tired. And so he said, I've got 2 offers. What do I do? As I recall, one was for 1.1 million, one was for 1.2 million. I hope the buyers and sellers aren't listening to this, Adam, obviously. They aren't, I'm sure. So what do I do? How do I handle this? Well, here's what I advised Adam, and here's and there are various scenarios to do multiple offers differently, but many agents don't really have a good feel for what is the best way to handle multiple offers. There are a variety of things you can do. One thing, as I told Adam, is you can counteroffer both offers with the seller. I mean, obviously, if the seller just wants to accept one, fine. But let's talk about that. I'm not much of a believer in sellers accepting the first offer that comes in, even if it's a reasonable offer. And let me tell you why. Because I believe it sends a message to the buyers that they paid too much, that the seller just reached down and signed it. So that's number one. I always recommend, even if an offer is a really good and fair offer, that the sellers counteroffer even for a little bit more, just to show that they're not that easy. I think that's important for keeping the buyer in the deal, because even if the seller accepts a contract, you want that buyer to feel like they got the good buy, like it was a little hard fought. If it comes too easy, I think they'll be afraid that they paid too much. So I always almost always recommend the seller's counteroffer. So that's number one. Number two, you always want to make sure that you tell this fight story, whatever it is, that boy, how hard it was to get the sellers to do whatever it is they did. That is critically important. I actually could do a whole webinar on just this 3-pronged thing I teach called how to do the fight story, the seller motivation, the seller urgency, and then using contrast price positioning in your talk tracks whenever you're negotiating offers, and actually whenever you're doing a number of things. But let me stay on point here. So in this multiple offer situation, you could counteroffer both offers and at the same amount or whatever, and basically same terms, same amount, as long as you feel like both buyers are good quality buyers, and basically say the first one to respond ends up with the house. Leave them open for a day, and the first one to respond ends up with the house. So you put in there clearly, if one responds, if this one or the other one responds before you do, then my counteroffer is immediately automatically withdrawn. There's language to do that. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is simply to, which I like better, is to take the one that you feel is the better offer, better quality buyer most likely to come up to the higher price, buyer most likely to move forward, most qualified, etc. And to take that contract, and what you do is you don't negotiate the other one. You get back with the other agent, and you do not even have to disclose. You don't have to disclose that there's another contract unless your state law requires it. I can't imagine, because it would seem, and I can't imagine a state that would require it, because you and your seller should be able to disclose or not disclose whatever you feel is appropriate. Remember, you represent the seller. And these are in scenarios, of course, where there's a separate buyer's agent, that you're not representing any of these buyers. That's a different can of worms, as they say. We're not going to go into that today. So I recommend that you take the one contract immediately. Let's say both of them are open for a day, that you take the one contract you like best, get over there immediately, have your sellers counteroffer that one at whatever the number is that makes sense, and leave it open for an amount of time which is lesser than the amount of time the other offer is open for. Okay, so you still got that other offer in play. Then you say to the agent, and this is the key, you say to the agent, I have another offer. Not going to disclose what it is, but it's very close to this offer. And you're obviously truthful. Say, I've got it sitting right here. My sellers decided to negotiate with your buyers first, with you and your buyers first, because we feel like your buyers may be better quality buyers, although these other buyers are, in our view, fine. They're excellent. But we don't want to put undue pressure on you and your buyers by doing a multiple counteroffer where he who acts first gets the house. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a counteroffer. It's very fair. Then you use your how hard it was to get the sellers to come down to this price, whatever that counteroffer is. Took all this time. I had distributed the urgency, the motivation, the fight story. I worked really hard to get you this. It's an amazingly fair counteroffer. That's so important to tell that story. You use contrast price positioning, which you give the co-broke a couple of examples, 2 or 3 examples of why this is an amazing price on this home based on what else is listed or is sold out there. That's so important to have, using this contrast price positioning for your talk track when you talk to that other agent. And then you say, but look, we don't want to put your buyer under undue pressure. We've left this open for 12 hours so they can think about it, 6 hours, whatever it is, 8 hours. And it's pretty much take it or leave it. Pretty much take it or leave it. If there are any fine nuances in there that need to be changed, then we need to do it quickly. But we're not going to negotiate the other deal. We're not going to negotiate the other deal until we resolve this one, but we need to get it done within the next X number of hours. That actually, taking pressure off of buyers like that actually puts more pressure on buyers, I have found. And in practice, by pressure, positive pressure, that they want the home more, but they feel like you're being nice. You're not saying, hey, respond within 10 minutes or you're going to lose the house because we're counteroffering both. That sometimes causes people just to be pushed away, in my view. So that is the way I would handle that kind of a situation in most scenarios. There could be exceptions, but that's what I do. So let me go back to the screen share to finish up today. And wow, we're running just about right on time with an hour here. So here we go. Let me back on the screen share, stop share. Why is my little slide deck not coming up? Let me go off the screen share and see why I'm not getting this. There we go. With that, with that, with that. There we go. Okay, so if you'd like to see something that is what I believe the future of real estate, I'd like you to go to our new website that we just launched this morning. I wanted to have it ready for the webinar. I won't even tell you how hard me and my team, my entire team, worked to put this together. This is our new 990sales.com website. I've done a couple webinars where I've talked about what's happening in real estate, how realtors' incomes, when the market is soaring, realtor incomes are declining. Went from 44,000 to 38,000 and predicted to go lower this year. I mean, does that make any sense that realtor incomes are dropping when the market is soaring? Well, it does when you realize that commissions are dropping. The average commission rate has gone from high 5s to low 5s, and now is predicted, it's dropping like precipitously, predicted in an article in Inman to drop into the high 4s this year and to continue to decline at the most rapid rate in history. And what's interesting about commissions, and believe me, I've made millions through what we're going to call the traditional 6% commission. I'm not sitting here dinging it. I'm simply saying that it's gone. It's gone. It's dead, but doesn't know it. And in a couple, 3 years, this commission that everybody's been accustomed to for so long isn't even going to exist. There are a number of reasons for that, from the way the type of buyer and sellers that are in the market today, the younger, more millennial type that are looking for lower transaction costs on everything, are very sharp and just do not accept tradition. They just don't accept what is because it was. They simply don't. Also, because the transaction costs in everything, the cost of everything comes down. Computers improve in value and either stay at the same price or go down in price. There's a better value proposition. From Amazon to Uber, to Tesla. There's better value propositions every year out there. That has not been the case in real estate, as actually the cost to sell a home have declined because of the internet and not having to pay $2 or $3 an agate line for print media. As the cost to sell a home have declined, is the ability to put homes in front of virtually every buyer. 98% of buyers start their home search online. The ability to put virtually every home in front of buyers just by uploading it to the internet. As all of these productivity and cost-saving tools have come at our disposal, and many more that we're not even using, still realtors persist in this view in light of the public perception that commissions are too high, in light of the fact that other industries have improved their value proposition, in light of the fact that sellers hate this. Everybody feels like this 6% commission is absurd. I was sitting, when I flew back from DC, next to the service manager, the customer service manager of Bentley Motors. And we were talking about that, and he mentioned what I do, and I told him I was in real estate, that I coach and train real estate, and that I have this model with a 990 commission model, because I believe that's the future of real estate, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And he says, "Oh, Greg," and he used the word, he said, "the commissions are obscene. I just sold my home in DC for 700 and some thousand and bought another home, and the realtors, I wrote out huge checks. I know it was loaded into the price of the home I buy, and then there was the home that I sold. I can't even think of how much money all that was. It was ridiculous. The realtors didn't do anything that was worth anywhere near that." That's the common perception. Like it or not, it's just the way it is, guys. So I believe I know that realtor incomes are dropping because commissions are dropping. And where is the big pressure right now? The big pressure, it'll later on be on the buyer side, but in most MLSs, the co-bro commission is still holding around 2.5% or 3% for most homes. And where the real pressure is on the list side. And so here's the deal. It's going to go away. What realtors have not realized, the great luxury we've had, we've been paid to have inventory. We've been paid. Car dealers don't get paid to have inventory. They pay to have inventory. Amazon doesn't get paid to have inventory. They pay to have inventory. Every store, every business, everybody you know in any other business gets paid. They make their money by paying to have inventory and then finding buyers to buy it, and they have an in-between profit. In real estate, we've actually had this list side commission where, gee whiz, listings attract buyers. And let's say there's 2.5% or 3% always on the buyer side. If you took listings for free, I just want you to see this and understand, if you took listings for free, I'd take them today. You offer me 20 good medium to low price listings, 20. For free. Greg, you get nothing on the list side, but you get the signs, you get the branding, you get the ability to advertise them, and you get all the buyers and you get all the sellers of those listings, maybe 30 or 40% of those sellers who will buy a home through you. Would I take those 20 listings in a heartbeat? And you see, that's the big gap in the herd. That's what most realtors are missing, is the market isn't there yet. The market, you can still go out and list properties for something between, let's say on the list side, between 1% and 3% most likely. 1% is considered to be a pretty good deal on the list side for a seller. 1.5%, 2%, like the Redfin model, 1.5%. That's considered to be a pretty good deal. It won't be in 2 or 3 years. That's the point. It won't be in 2 or 3 years. So all I'm trying to do, I won't coach traditional real estate anymore. I was asked the other day, Greg, all these things that you've learned over the years in terms of helping us get a higher commission, all the strategies you have. I have tons of strategies for helping you try to talk sellers up on commission, to show worth, etc. The reason I'm not coaching that isn't because it doesn't work. It does. It's not coaching the future of real estate. That is not the future. What I'm doing is coaching my agents to ride down the ship. You know what I mean by ride down, to sink with the ship, to just keep eating, to just keep their head above water and get as much as they can while the list commissions keep going down. And to me, that's stupid. All they'll end up with is 2 or 3 years going to a Redfin and applying for a salary job, or going to a Hauser and applying for a salary job, or to Trelora, or to OfferPad, or to any of these, Open Door. who are buying and selling homes. And that's where this business is headed, guys. Believe it or not, where it's headed is that these companies that are lowering transaction costs, charging Hauser charges $0, Trelora $2,500, a slew of companies like, and then Redfin at the high end, actually at 1 or 1.5% on the list side, they have a salaried agent model. You make 40, 50, 60 grand, get health insurance, report to a boss, and get vacations when you want. If that's what you want, then go get a job. But that's not the reason I got into real estate. That's not the reason most of you got into real estate. And so what I'm recommending to you is you really take a look. Look at our model at 990sellshomes.com. I mean, really you owe it to yourself, not to me. You owe it to yourself to look at that website. I wrote every word of copy on that website personally. Now, I had graphic designers, national branding people. I mean, it was put together by some of the top people in the country in terms of branding, imaging, website design. I believe it's one of the best website designs on the internet today. But that isn't the point. What you're seeing in the writing is me. That is me writing every word of that. I wrote it 3-4 times over till I got it just right. I've got 30-40 hours, and it is my vision of where real estate is headed, but I'm presenting in the form of this 990 commission strategy, obviously. But it's why it works for sellers, and it's why it works for you. And I will tell you, and the opportunity is now. You don't have to change your whole model. Let me finish with this before we end today. You don't have to change your whole model. In fact, I'm going to go off screen share and get in your face for a minute. Just a minute here. Share screen, just a minute here. Stop share, there we go. Okay, so I'm sorry. You do not have to change your whole model. If you're concerned now, if you don't, like CB, you're brand new back there, you just should go for it. I mean, you're kidding me? You'd be crazy not to go to this website and just go for it. But those of you who are earning commissions, I'm not telling you to just trash them. I'm telling you, try this. Take it into a market where you don't have a share. Try this concept. Try what I'm talking about. Go in. And to use the 990 strategy, I have it licensed, I have it trademarked, I have all the materials. You can do it with us. And if you're interested in doing that, it's just email coach@realestatemaverics.com or email me, greg@realestatemaverics.com. And we can send you, the whole scenario, how this licensing model works. It's like a business in a box ready to go, but you can do it yourself. You don't have to do it with us. Use 880, just don't use 990. I teach it, it's right there on the website. I mean, it's not a problem. I want to help you. Whether you pay to be in our license model and get all the materials, everything customized, video and website, that's great. We think we give an amazing value, a great value proposition. But what I'm finishing this webinar with today is this. Whether you join what I'm doing, become part of the 990 model, read through the website and say, yeah, I'd like to have this business in a box, or do it yourself. Use some other number, create the materials, understand how to go out and market it, understand how to go out and present it. Try it. Take it into a market of 1,000 homes. 1,000 homes, and just do what we say and try it and see where you are in a year. You will have, if you do exactly what we teach, you'll have a 20% market share in 90 days. So all the listings that come up in 90 days, you'll have a 20% market share of 1,000 homes. 1,000 homes has a 6% turnover. A 6% turnover, what is that? That's 60 homes a year or 5 a month. You'll be getting one listing a month out of just a measly 1,000 homes just by hitting those homes with your message 2 times a month. We teach you exactly how to do this. Up it to 5,000 homes, and it's 5 listings a month. And that's just after 90 days. It gets better after that. I've proven this time and time and time again. And what's each listing worth? It isn't worth 0 or 990 or whatever number you use. We use 990 because it makes sense, and I have it trademarked, and we have a whole business built around it. But whether you use $50 or $500 isn't the point. Listings are worth, on average, 1 buyer side transaction for each listing. A $300,000 listing is worth $9,000. Sometimes no, sometimes it'll sell co-broke and you make nothing. But sometimes the sellers will buy through you and you'll end up making a commission. Sometimes the sellers will refer their clients to you and you'll make a commission. Sometimes a buyer will buy their own home, that home through you. You'll make the 3% because ours is 990 plus whatever the co-broke is. You as a listing agent make that. And sometimes a buyer will look at it and won't like it, but will buy another home through you. On average, nationally, each listing on the buy side is the equivalent of about 1 3% commission, 1 3% commission, 1 buyer side sale. And in fact, Gary Keller, co-founder and chairman of Keller Williams Realty, he said that each he was quoted as saying that each listing, if properly marketed, should be worth from 1 to 3 buyer side deals. So let me ask you, I go back to my scenario where somebody offers me 20 listings for free, 20 listings for free. Do I take them? Are you kidding me? 20 listings, $300,000 each for free. On average, they're worth $9,000 each. That's $180,000. 9,000 times 20 is $180,000. Yeah, I'm going to take those 20, not to mention the branding, the recognition, the relationship with those sellers who will refer other people to me because I'm going to do a great job in the future. Bottom line is I take every one for free. I would pay for them. And that is getting ahead. That is getting ahead of the curve. That's the Wayne Gretzky story, where Wayne, as a kid, one of the best hockey players of all time, I've told the story, is sitting with his dad as a kid watching a hockey match, and he's sketching little stuff on a pad, and his dad asks him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm looking at the hockey players out there, and they're all skating to where the puck is. I'm trying to figure out where the puck is going because I think it'd be smarter to skate where the puck is going." That's the point. If you ride the ship down, you'll never have an opportunity to go in and take the market share. Because if you're just 3 years from now doing what everybody else is doing, charging virtually nothing on the list side, and it will be there, you mark my words, this video is being recorded, and you can put it in your calendar, 36 months from today, the average list commission in this country will be between 0 and 1%. Between 0 with 1% being the high end. You mark my words, you will see that between 0 and 1%. The trick is not to ride the ship down with 1.2 million realtors, but to go in and get aggressive and own the market. And if you control the inventory, then all of a sudden you're going to have all that business. You're going to be making all those buyer side sales. I'll leave it at that. 990 Sales is our consumer facing website that is used for the agents I coach around the country in my 990 program to give them credibility, generate business for them, to allow them to have a place to go to show sellers how amazing this program is and how it works for the sellers and works for them. I'll go back to the screen share because that's not what the webinar is about, but I wanted to just give you that little pitch on, if you're, again, not about 990, look at 990sales.com and just understand the concept. You don't need 990 to do it if you want to do it on your own. Although, if I recommend that you at least consider, if you're interested in that, talking with us, and just email greg@realestatemaverickс.com. We're going to finish up today by saying, if you want some links to our webinars, you know we are amazingly generous with everything we have. We try to be. Email jen@realestatemavericks.com. That's for copies of, webinars, audios, all kinds of things, whatever problems you're having. No charge. We're here to help you. We love to help you. We love to get to know you. And I really mean that. We do. And if you enjoyed this webinar, I would love a recommendation on my LinkedIn profile. And that's just Greg Hague on LinkedIn. Put it under the Real Estate Mavericks brand. That's my coaching brand. If you've already left me one, you could also leave me one under 990 Sales. I have a 990 Sales brand there. So you could leave me one there. Would be much, much appreciated. Remember, I talked about the power of a gift. That would be a gift to me. I am the most recommended coach on LinkedIn, and I'd like to keep it that way. So you can email coach@realestatemaveriks for info. I just talked about that. And I'll finish up by ending this webinar the way I always end webinars. And I will simply ask you guys, think about your life. Think about where you're going to be in a few years. Do a look back. Transport yourself to a few years from now. And I want you to look back. And don't think about the small stuff. Just think about, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? What do you want to be known for? Now, everybody has their own outlook on that. Everybody has their own view. But I know from my perspective, I've always wanted to be someone that made a difference. I've always wanted to be somebody that made a meaningful and positive difference. And in a big way, quite honestly. I've really wanted to be somebody who impacted the lives of the people around me, and somebody who also impacted an industry. And that, of course, is real estate, because my heritage is in real estate. My dad was in real estate. And the only way you do that, is to look at that industry. Look at the Achilles heels. Look at what could be better. Look at what's not right. Look at what other industries are doing. And, well, that takes a certain mentality, because he who changes a game is going to get flack from those who don't want the game to change. But these are the people I look back on in history. These are the people that I respect most in history. These have been our greatest leaders in business and politics and history. And in every one of those cases, in my view, these people were mavericks. And so you just ask yourself, is there a maverick in you? You guys, thank you for tuning in. Back with you again next Wednesday.